what is autoimmune disease and how do you heal from it?
That's definitely for me then. So that worked out.
Yes.
Okay, so autoimmune diseases in really general terms is when the part of your immune system that is normally involved in protecting you, right? So if you get a virus or a bacteria, there's a part of your there's an inflammatory immune system that goes out there to seek out, destroy, and protect the host, right? That's the real goal of immune function, is protecting the host. So in autoimmune disease, for many reasons, which I can get into, the immune system stops functioning properly. And instead of attacking only invading bacteria, viruses, et cetera, it starts attacking one's own tissue. And there are many different types of autoimmune diseases, although I see them really as the same because of they're started by the same things and they're reversed by the same things, but the symptoms really are related to what antibodies you have. So for example, when I had lupus, I had antibodies at first that caused me arthritis and rashes and kidney failure. And then later on ones that caused mini strokes, which was it was still lupus, but with a new antibody, right? Other people with rheumatoid arthritis, they might generally have more joint pain and disfigurement and fatigue, but not other organ functions. Scleroderma in the skin, MS in the nervous system, but it's all the same pathway of the immune system turning on the host body because of really confusion created by chronic inflammation. And chronic inflammation can really take over that inflammatory response. And that is caused by many things. One, which I focus on a lot, especially in Goodbye Lupus, which is your nutrition. Two, your levels of stress and happiness, and your sleep levels. So all these different things contribute to this chronic inflammatory state, which can then trigger disease, whether it's heart disease, diabetes, or cancer, or autoimmune diseases. So the other part of the question was, what do you do about it? Well, we go after all of those things. So I have a very specific protocol that we developed back when I reversed my lupus 16 years ago. We thought it was just a fat loss protocol that was going to increase my metabolism and make me have my dream physique. It worked, but at the same time, for the first time in 12 years that I'd been sick, I had normal kidney function, I had no blood clot antibodies, and I had no lupus antibodies. My cholesterol went from over 200 to 150. This was in 3 months. So we realized, especially after I had my first son, that we had done something and we had to test it and understand it. And that's where our hyper-nourishment protocol came from. So we use an intentional overdose in the nutrients your body uses for cellular repair, because we have damage to work on, and optimal immune function, right? And that involves things like cruciferous vegetables in their raw state, omega-3 fatty acids. I like using flax and chia for that, and adequate hydration to allow all these processes to take place. And then for some folks, that's all they need. They hyper-nourish, and within weeks to a couple months or so, they can't believe how great they feel, right? For others who struggle, often there's an emotional component, trauma, depression, anxiety, all of those are inflammatory. So much so that there have been some doctors that suggested we give prednisone to people with depression. I do not recommend that, but we do need to work on healing the emotional wounds. So for example, I was actually really happy today because I have a rapid recovery group where I work with people every day. And today I was reading over people's logs, and we're just finishing the 5th week. And we have multiple people say that this was the happiest they've ever been. This is the first time they haven't had anxiety. 5 weeks after changing their habits, not only around nutrition, but around how they talk to themselves and their self-care. And when we get the emotional health where it needs to be, then recovery is even faster. You add in a good amount of sleep and you see the kind of rapid results we've been able to get in people. So if you're struggling to get better, make sure you're looking at all those different aspects of your life to make sure that they're all aimed towards getting better health.
What are the diseases that make up autoimmune disease?
Oh my gosh, there's so many. I could be here all day. The most common ones that we see: rheumatoid arthritis, lupus, scleroderma, Sjogren's, multiple sclerosis. There are a lot of people, Hashimoto's is probably the most common, actually. I take that back. So autoimmune thyroid disease, although Hashimoto's is not treated by rheumatologists. The main reason being, in Western medicine, the thyroid is considered disposable because you can replace it with a pill. So people with Hashimoto's aren't usually put on immunosuppression. However, when you don't treat the underlying autoimmune disease, which is not done in Western medicine, those people usually go on to develop rheumatoid arthritis and other kinds of autoimmune because they still have ongoing autoimmune even after the thyroid's destroyed. So that one's really the most common, even though it's not usually treated as rheumatological. But those are the ones that I see most commonly, as well as people who haven't been sick long enough to be diagnosed as rheumatoid arthritis versus lupus versus Sjogren's. And so instead they'll be called undifferentiated or mixed connective tissue disease, which really means you have some signs or symptoms of multiple, but we don't know which one it is yet. So it's kind of like a umbrella diagnosis.
So how many people in the United States have autoimmune disease?
You want me to pull up numbers? You're gonna have to give me a sec.
Just
It
to
is a
try to
growing number. It's a growing number every day. And there's actually, it used to be something that was fairly uncommon. When I had lupus at 16, we didn't know anybody that had lupus. It was so rare and so unusual. Now everybody knows somebody who has it. And I was recently just talking about a study that they did where they were looking at why is it that autoimmune diseases are increasing rapidly all over the entire world. And now in countries where they never had autoimmune diseases like Crohn's and ulcerative colitis, now they have them, like in the Middle East and in Asia. And so some geneticists tried to figure out what is it that's happening? Is human genetics changing? Because it's believed in Western medicine that autoimmune diseases are genetic. So if we're having more autoimmune disease, human genetics must be changing, right? That was the purpose of their study. And what they found was human genetics have not changed over the past 30, 40 years. That what they did find, though, is that the rise and spread of autoimmune disease is exactly mirroring the rise and spread of the Western diet. And so it really was just more information that shows what we've been saying all along, is that if you eat the Western diet, you will get sick, whether you just, watched Neil Barnard talk about diabetes or you watched Esselstyn talk about heart disease. The Western diet is causing all of this. And as well, it's causing autoimmune diseases, although they haven't been discussed as much, except maybe by me, as being a primary trigger for developing these diseases rather than purely genetics, as it was believed before.
So how possible is it to cure an autoimmune disease, and when does it become not possible?
So I'm always really careful with words like cure because they turn people off. If you say you can cure lupus, someone else will say, no, I looked on the website for the Lupus Foundation and all this stuff. It's incurable, and therefore you're blah, blah, blah. I'm not going to listen to you. So I talk about disease reversal, because while you can argue whether or not I'm cured, right? I had lupus for 12 years. I have not had lupus for 16. Am I cured, or will it come back? I don't know. Right now, all I know is that for the past 16 years, I've felt extraordinary. I'm 45 years old. I feel better than I did as a teenager, right? So I think we have to be careful about those words because they really upset people and get people out of where they need to be, right? But these diseases are reversible. What you cannot argue with is that someone has a disease and the symptoms go away, then we are reversing it, right? That is something where people cannot pick on the words with me, because it's absolutely true. We reverse the progress of it, and then we reverse the symptoms of it. We reverse the labs. So I went back to a state that shows that I have no disease currently. And I think that's probably true with everyone, right? If someone with type 2 diabetes becomes a vegan marathon runner, they're not going to have type 2 diabetes anymore, right? But if they instead switch to a Western diet and stop all exercise, could they eventually get it again? Of course, right? So I look at it in terms of disease reversal. And from what I have found, and I've worked now with thousands of people all over the world with many different diseases, that we can reverse these diseases. Now, there's a difference between reversing the disease and reversing all of the symptoms. And that really depends on the person and their health, how much damage was done, for example. So I've published reversing end-stage kidney failure, and the people that were on the, someone was on a transplant list, got off the transplant list in 6 weeks, doubled her kidney function using nutrition, right? My protocol. Now, she didn't go up to normal kidney function, right? She went up to double what she had, and then we hit a plateau because she'd had 9 years of lupus attacking her kidneys, and there was sclerosis or scar tissue. Same thing, I had someone in my recent rapid recovery group, 2 men with lung disease, one from autoimmune disease and one from COVID. And the one with COVID was on oxygen, got off of oxygen, but he didn't have normal lung, right? He couldn't run without needing a little bit of oxygen, right? So he didn't need it for everything. So we reversed it, but not back to normal yet. The other man at 5 weeks, he was on the lung transplant list and was kicked off the lung transplant list because his lungs were too healthy for transplant, but they're still not as healthy as my lungs, right? So as far as how much recovery you can get, really that's going to depend on how much damage you have and how much is scar tissue versus healthy tissue. But we can eliminate those antibodies. People with Hashimoto's all the time, they get rid of those antibodies, and we know they don't have Hashimoto's anymore. Some of them get normal thyroid function back, and others still need medication because the damage is already permanent. So no matter where you are, it's always worth doing, because you're going to optimize your health, you're going to optimize immune function, and it'll make you more resilient. You know, I was just on the news talking about cruciferous vegetables, because I'm their vegetable lady on all the news stations, but the Johns Hopkins just did a study showing that cruciferous vegetables cuts the RNA replication of COVID and cold viruses in half, right? So it's still worth it to eat this way. Even if you can't get rid of every symptom that you had because of long-term damage, you can optimize your immune function and still live a healthier life the best you can have.